We are live. Thank you for your patience.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our first community meeting to discuss potential changes to the DASH network for fiscal year 2022. My name is Whitney Code, and I am the Alexandria Transit Company Marketing and Communications Manager. And this meeting is being recorded for everyone's information. Tonight, we'll be discussing and seeking feedback on major route and service changes as part of the new DASH network. This new network represents a complete redesign of Alexandria's bus network intended to meet current and future transit ridership demand and to encourage more people to use transit for more trips at more times of the day. We look forward to answering any questions you may have and listening to any feedback you may want to share. But before we begin, two of our wonderful DASH board members are here this evening, Ajaisha Thomas and Dr. Ian Greaves, and I'd like to give them the opportunity to welcome you all. Ajaisha, we'll start with you, followed by Ian.
Awesome. Thank you, Whitney. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone for joining, giving up your time to give your input into this plan that's going to affect our city for the next decade and more. And it's so important to have community input and community participation when it comes to important items like this, because transit connects people to so many opportunities, and we want to make sure that we have the best transit system for the residents across all of Alexandria. And you being here tonight and sharing your comments and feedback is going to make sure that we do so. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Hi, good evening, everyone. As my colleagues mentioned, we are very pleased to have your feedback, your input. As you know, the board meets monthly, and your input is paramount to our decision making. So we appreciate all comments and look forward to serving Alexandria immensely. Thank you very much.
Thank you both for that very warm welcome. Martin, next slide, please. Actually, one more. Perfect, thank you. So if you all attending here this evening, or if you're watching this recorded video, have any additional feedback or would like more detailed information, I encourage you to please visit dashbus.com/new network. For anyone who would like to view information about the fiscal year 2022 proposed changes in Spanish or Amharic, I encourage you to visit dashbus.com/new network Spanish or dashbus.com/new network Amharic. Now, before we begin, there are a few poll questions that I would like to pose to our attendees. So you should be seeing on your screen momentarily the first poll question that I have for you this evening. Perfect, I hope you all can see this. If you would please just select if you are or are not a resident of the city of Alexandria. Give you just a moment to select your answers, and then we will move on to the next poll question. All right, we'll move on to the next poll question. Caitlin, if you could do poll question number 2 now, please. Thank you very much. Now, how often have you used DASH in the last month? There are several options listed here: multiple times per week, about once a week, about once per month. I have not used DASH in the last month, or I don't use DASH but often ride Metro bus or Metro rail. Give you all just a moment. All right, thank you very much. And now we will move on to poll question number 3. This is the last question that I have for you right now, but there will be some additional polling questions as we move through this evening's presentation. And poll question number 3. How did you hear about this meeting? Was it a DASH email update, the DASH website, social media, bus stop flyer, word of mouth, or other. If your selection is other, I do encourage you to tell us where you heard about this meeting in the Q&A section. All right, thank you very much for your participation. We appreciate your feedback. It's very helpful. As we move through tonight's information, I encourage all of our attendees to submit your questions and comments by clicking on that Q&A button on your screen. It's at the bottom in the middle there. If you would type your question, and at the conclusion of this evening's presentation, we will respond to your inquiries. This will help ensure that we are documenting all of your feedback to share with our full board of directors. And now I will turn it over to DASH's Director of Planning and Marketing, Martin Barna.
Thank you, Whitney. Good evening, everyone. And thank you, Ian and Ajayesha, for those remarks and the welcome. Very happy to be with you this evening to talk to you about this important upcoming year of transit and what we're hoping to accomplish in FY22. I've got a presentation lined up here to share some information about what DASH has proposed, and just to kind of talk about specifically how that might affect West Alexandria, because I know that's kind of the focus of this call is West Alexandria. So I'll spend extra time talking about that part of the city, and then of course we'll have the Q&A at the end if you have any specific questions about West Alexandria. Happy to answer those, and then if there are folks who are interested in other parts of the city, we're happy to answer those as well, though I would want to save that for towards the end so that we can cover the West Alexandria information first. So I have my kind of agenda here. I'm going to be talking briefly about the Alexandria Transit Vision Plan, then getting into the kind of the new DASH network, which is the first phase of that. But I guess before we do that, I thought it might be helpful to cover a couple more poll questions to get a little more information about who is attending this meeting, and what parts of the city you're interested in learning more about, so I can kind of cater the presentation to that. So Caitlin, could you queue up the next questions? Okay, so hopefully you guys can still see that. And so this one asks which neighborhood or neighborhoods, this is you can respond with multiple answers to this one. Well, which parts of the city are you most interested in learning about tonight? You've got the West End, you got a couple places along the West End. We're talking about Lincolnia, Beauregard Street, kind of south of Seminary. So in there, kind of near Beauregard and Sanger, south of Marks Center, south of Southern Towers. And then you've got other parts of the West End, north towards Southern Towers and up towards King Street. And then North Van Dorn Street, kind of on the east side of 395, and then Landmark and South Van Dorn, and then other parts of the city. All right. Caitlin, I guess we've gotten some responses there.
Yes, we have, and we're still getting more, but it looks like quite a few people want to hear about Landmark and South Van Dorn Street, as well as Central Alexandria and North Van Dorn Street, and a few for the West End.
Okay, so South Van Dorn and then a couple Central Alexandria. Okay, sounds good. And can you queue up the next two questions as well?
Yes.
We appreciate you guys taking the time to answer these questions up front. This is really helpful, and this is a new kind of interactive environment that we're trying to set up. So this is really helpful for getting information from you, on what you're interested in learning about. All right, here's the second question, or the next question, which is which existing DASH route do you use, or do you use the most? And again, you can make multiple selections here. So we've kind of focused on the routes that serve parts of West Alexandria, but the other category covers the other routes as well. So feel free to go ahead and input your responses now. Okay. Any initial results, Caitlin?
Yes, the highest responses are for the AT5, 8, 6, and 2, but there's pretty general interest all around. There's at least one answer for every single one.
Okay, great. And then I think we have one more question before I start going into my presentation, and that is about the Alexandria Transit Vision Plan, which we've been working on for a couple of years. Just wanted to get a sense of how familiar folks are with the Alexandria Vision Plan, if you've heard about it before, or if you need a little extra background on it. Okay. All right. Any results on that one?
It looks like we're not getting more answers. Most people have heard either a lot about it or a little bit about it. We have a few who have not heard of it.
Okay, great. That's really helpful. All right. I promise those are the last poll questions until the very end. So we'll kind of get to the meat of the meeting now. Yeah, so we're here tonight to talk about the new DASH network. And that represents the first phase of the Alexandria Transit Vision Plan. And there we go. So the Alexandria Transit Vision Plan, or the ATV as we've been calling it, is an effort by DASH and the city to completely redesign the city's bus network in order to make it in order to encourage more transit usage and also to improve overall mobility for city residents. This is a project that started back in early 2018. We went through a few rounds of public outreach, had a couple different concepts, a couple different proposed networks. Ultimately, the board adopted 2 networks in late 2019, a little over a year ago. One was a 2022 network plan, and one was a 2030 network plan. So we're trying to build towards that long-term 2030 plan, which is what we feel, based on input from the community and our input as well, what the transit network should look like by 2030. So we've got that 2030 network, and we've also got a 2022 network as well. We were hoping that we'd be able to implement the 2022 network in FY22. We were able to implement a good part of it, but not the full 2022 network. So we are implementing a reduced version of that 2022 network later this year in September. And that is called the new DASH network. So 4 things to know about the ATV. I've listed them here. A couple of the main things that we're trying to accomplish is to increase ridership by making transit more useful for more people and more times a day. And that's kind of vague. I want to be really specific and intentional about this. We consider useful transit to be a transit route that runs frequently and with a long span. So it runs every 15 minutes or better all day, 7 days a week. And that we found that is kind of the threshold at which it becomes increasingly useful for the average rider and where a lot more people will actually use it. So we believe that that's kind of an important threshold that we want to try to achieve on a lot of routes. The ATV plan is based on existing and future demand. You know, we're trying to build this for 2030, so we want to be mindful of the growth that is anticipated in Alexandria, as well as additional developments. You know, Landmark, other places, Potomac Yard. We've obviously got the new metro station coming up, Potomac Yard, so incorporating that into our planning as well. And then the third bullet you see there is that we want to make sure that we identify that this plan will increase access to transit, particularly frequent all-day transit for low-income groups and minority groups across the city. I'll be talking about that a little bit more later. And then also it does a good job of covering existing boarding. So there's not a lot of people, there's a very small number of people who would not be within 1/8 of a mile of a bus stop in the new DASH network. 99.5% of existing boardings are within 1/8 of a mile of a new bus stop. So that's kind of the high level summary of the ATV. The new DASH network, which is kind of the immediate near term project that we're implementing, is the first phase of that. It will be launched in September of this year. So we're talking about 6 months away from now. As I mentioned, it's kind of a modern bus network that seeks to provide frequent all-day service and improve overall mobility. The first thing that people will notice about this new network when I start showing maps, and many I'm sure have seen this already, is that there are all new route numbers. So that's going to be a very, very big change. And that's not something that we decided arbitrarily. It's something that we wanted to be very intentional about. The reason that we're redoing the line numbers is first because the prefix AT is a little bit difficult for some people, especially for folks that are either not native English speakers or they're not familiar with Alexandria and the Dash system. A lot of them tend to confuse it with 80, the number 80, and that has created some confusion in the past. And so we're trying to make it a little bit simpler. And also we are using the numbers now to convey information about the system, whereas the current route numbers are a little bit arbitrary. These new numbers that we're going to be sharing with you are intended to tell you about the system. For example, all the routes that run 7 days a week will be lines 30 through 36, whereas the ones that only run on weekdays or peak only, those would be 102, 103, 104. So we're trying to convey some information. You can look at very easily at a map and have that information. So it's not just the route numbers that are changing. There are major changes to a lot of the route alignments. So there's going to be a lot of communication required for that as well. And we, as you can see at the bottom, have a website, dashbus.com/new network, which has a lot of helpful information that will help people understand what the potential changes will be and how they'll affect them. I want to highlight that there's some neighborhood specific information for 13 different neighborhoods throughout the city. So you can kind of click on your neighborhood and see exactly what the changes are that will affect you. And there's also a table which references the existing Dash routes and kind of tracks those to what the future new Dash network line would be. So you can use those resources to hopefully to learn more about the new network and what it might mean for you. As I've mentioned, the frequent network is really one of the most important parts of this new Dash network that we're launching. We are trying to operate an expanded frequent network. Currently, we don't really have any routes in our Dash system that run every 15 minutes or better all day, 7 days a week. So when I show you the maps in the following slides, these frequent routes will be shown in red. If we were to look at an existing Dash map, there will be no routes in red. So it's a big increase in frequent all-day service, which we believe, like I said, is very useful and will drive increased ridership. And lastly, I'll just note there are a couple changes for Metro bus routes as well. I'll be touching on a few of them tonight, but these are kind of in concert with the Dash changes. So I wanted to highlight those as well. So here is the first view of the proposed new Dash network, which again, we are proposing to launch in FY22, which starts in July, but the actual launch will be in September. So a couple just very high level things. I don't expect folks to be able to process this map immediately at this level, but just kind of to understand what to look for. The colors are very significant in the maps that I'll be sharing. As I mentioned, the red colors are frequent all day routes, which run every 15 minutes or better all day, 7 days a week. So whether it's 12 o'clock on a Tuesday or 8 o'clock on a Sunday night, there's gonna be a bus coming every 10 to 15 minutes usually. So you can see how the new network has a lot of red lines that spread out across the entire city, a lot in the West End, a lot through Central Alexandria and the King Street corridor, up through Arlandria and Potomac Yard, and then into Old Town. So kind of a very extensive network of those frequent lines. And kind of one important point that maybe gets lost sometimes in bus service planning discussions is a lot of people focus when they look at maps on where the lines are going, and that's certainly relevant to how useful they are. But these colors allow us to also convey the frequency of the service and the span. So which is, I would argue, equally important, if not more important than necessarily exactly where the routes go. Equally important, I would say. So the frequency really controls how useful they are. So that's just the point I want to emphasize. And then the other colors, you can see the blue and the green. The green routes are routes that operate peak only. So they only operate on weekdays from 6 to 10 a.m. and 3 to 7 p.m., somewhere around there. The blue routes most of them run 7 days a week at a lower frequency than the red routes run. So a couple additional maps to show you that kind of give you a sense of the overall network. These show demographics, so you can kind of see, this is a map of Alexandria, population density. The darker colors are where you have more density. So kind of just to orient yourselves, Old Town is obviously over here, and then you've got 395, Mark Center's right here, Landmark, and Van Dorn Metro. So you can see some of the density areas. You got Southern Towers and Park Center here. Skyline is up in this area. Old Town, Arlandria, and then obviously areas along South Van Dorn with a lot of the high rises down there as well. So what you can see, the red lines again are the frequent network. So you can see the red lines in Alexandria that run frequently and all day are really well designed, well suited to serve these denser areas. So you have this really useful service in areas where a lot of people can benefit from it. and you can see this is the King Street corridor, and then you got Delray in here and Arlandria right in here. So this is the same map, but I have all the lines on it now, so you can see that there is service to a lot of these areas that was not part of the frequent network, but it's still there. So again, the green lines are peak only. The blue lines are usually 7 days a week. This map is the next in the series. It shows residents in poverty. So you have, you see where a lot of the denser areas of people that are below the federal poverty threshold. So you can see again that there's a lot of really good frequent service that goes to the areas, the parts of the city where you have lower income individuals and families. So we're trying to serve those communities really well with this useful frequent service. Again, you can see all the routes there, same map. And then the last demographic maps here, this is minority residents. So you can see the darker shades of pink are the where there's a higher percentage of residents of color. And you can see that, again, the frequent routes, the red frequent routes, do a pretty good job of serving the areas where we see those individuals or higher percentages. The one corridor that you may have noticed in these slides that is not as well served or is not included as a frequent route is Duke Street. There are a combination of routes along Duke Street that result in a combined headways that have frequent service. However, we are not showing it as frequent in FY22 because we cannot guarantee that those routes will be aligned or offset so that there'll be a bus running every 15 minutes. But in the future years, FY23 and 24, we expect that will become a frequent corridor as well. And just final slide up before I get into West Alexandria, just these are some of the benefits overall of the new Dash network. We've got that frequent network that across the entire city. We have major increases in access to that frequent service. You go from having about 40,000 residents today who have access. They can walk to a bus route that has frequent all-day service. It will be right about 100,000 with this new network. And then you can see when you talk about low-income and minority residents, we have less than 3 out of every 10 low-income residents today that have access to frequent all-day service. That goes up to 73%. Similar numbers for minority, senior, and then even jobs as well. You obviously want to have really good transit access to jobs. So currently 40% of jobs in Alexandria are within walking distance of a stop that has a bus coming out all day every 15 minutes or better. That goes up to 66% with this new network in the fall. And then just the last bullet there, I'll highlight, this network will obviously be, we believe it will be a big benefit for a lot of the city, a lot of the transit riders, but also non-users will benefit as well. We believe with additional ridership, you'll see the benefits like reduced traffic congestion, less environmental impact, and stronger economy. A line I heard a long time ago that really stuck with me is that the benefits of transit and the reasons why it's so effective and helpful for cities, they don't exist just by buses running with few people on them. The benefits are really accrued when you have with buses with a lot of people on them, and you're having less people driving, you're having less environmental impact. So really important that we make changes to the network that help drive up ridership, which will help out the city overall.
Martin, before you move on,
Sure.
I just want to remind people to put your questions, if you have any, in the Q&A. I'm collecting them and then I'll be sharing them at the conclusion of Martin's presentation. So I want to make sure that people know to submit their questions because we want to answer them.
Yes, thank you. We will definitely be going through those questions after I finish going through some of these maps, and we'll be happy to answer those as best we can and take any feedback that you have as well. All right, so we've talked about kind of the overall network. Now I'm shifting gears and talking more specifically about West Alexandria. So overall, as you've kind of seen from some of these maps, we believe that there'll be significant improvements in service for most communities in West Alexandria. I've included a map here that kind of zooms in a little bit on West Alexandria. It's still, I recognize, a little hard to read, but I can just show you that we've got the main route that goes north-south in West Alexandria is line 35, you can see here. And this effectively replaces most of the AT1 Plus that exists today, from Van Dorn all the way up to Mark Center. And then it actually goes all the way up to Pentagon, which I'll show you more about in a second. So that's a frequent all-day route running every 10 minutes all day on weekdays and every 15 on weekends. We've got a few other frequent routes you can see here, departing from Mark Center, going over to Potomac Yard, Shirlington. And then line 31 is also a frequent route, runs from NBC to Park Center and then down the King Street Metro, down the King Street corridor to the Metro and then into Old Town. And then you've also got the service being maintained on Seminary Janney's. And then you've got most of the service in the Van Dorn and Landmark area is being maintained along the same alignments as it is today. You've got line 32, which basically is the AT7 today. It follows the same alignment, will have the same service patterns. And then you've got line 30, which replaces the AT8 along the same alignment all the way into Old Town. And I'll note also that there are a couple Metro bus routes shown on here, and I'll talk about those in a second, 7A and the 25B. So this is line 35. Again, this is what I was just talking about that replaces the AT1 Plus all the way up to Mark Center. There's two, it provides very frequent service that doesn't exist today along the AT1 Plus alignment, especially during middays and weekends. So you'll have great service on Saturdays and Sundays every 15 minutes. The two differences, or a couple differences from the AT1 with this one, is that it does not go all the way to Seminary Plaza. So you have to transfer at Mark Center to go to Seminary Plaza or Southern Towers. And it also does not deviate to Reading and Rayburn, which is something that the AT1 Plus currently does. So anyone who lives down there would need to walk a block or two up to Beauregard Street, where they would catch this new line 35, which runs very frequently. So a bus would be coming along pretty much very shortly after they came up to their stop. And then, like I said, it goes all the way up to the Pentagon. So you have a great connection 7 days a week from the west part of Alexandria all the way up to the Pentagon that you'll be able to use. So I mentioned Metrobus. There's one major change in Metrobus that's related to that line 35. Currently, the line 7A and F run along Beauregard Street, where this black dotted line is, south of Mark Center and Southern Towers. WMATA is proposing to realign that route over to North Van Dorn Street all the way down to the Van Dorn Metro to partially replace the 25B. And this section that is discontinued would obviously be replaced by the dash line 35. So that's what that would be. The other change is that the 25B, which currently is a Metro route that runs all the way from Ballston down to Van Dorn Street, that would actually end at Southern Towers with the 7A that I just mentioned, picking up part of the alignment, especially around Landmark Mall and down to Van Dorn Metro. All right, I think one or two maps left here. Line 36 is very similar to the AT9, the existing AT9. It has a little bit of a different alignment in West Alexandria, but it runs from Mark Center all the way to the new Potomac Yard Metro that opens up next year through, obviously the hospital here. Then you've got Bradley Shopping Center, Shirlington Transit Station, and then over to Potomac Yard. We did introduce a split alignment based on some feedback that we got to provide some all-day service along North Van Dorn Street here. I think that'll be very successful. And then we also have a split alignment in Park Fairfax as well. But combined, the 36A and B will operate every 15 minutes all day, 7 days a week. So really good crosstown connection, good from Southern Towers, to TC Williams, to these parts of the King Street corridor. And I think this is my last map. This is just showing the Seminary and Janney's corridor. We are maintaining local bus service with line 102. This is currently served by the AT2. But we are now going to be serving it by the line 102, which runs on weekdays only. It has local service throughout this entire segment from Mark Center, Southern Towers, all the way down to King Street Metro. The green dotted line is the Mark Center Express, which is a nonstop route that runs from Mark Center to King Street. So that's runs through the corridor, but it doesn't make stops. So a little bit of a different situation. So so the 102 would run every 30 minutes during peak, every 16 minutes during middays, and would not run on Saturdays and Sundays. And this is just, again, showing the Landmark and South Van Dorn area, which, there's pretty much the same alignments. AT1, AT8, and AT7 are just having new names in these areas. But you can see the 7A comes through, and that's the new route. So a lot to take in. I know I have a summary slide here that kind of outlines some of the main points from what I just discussed. But you can see that we're adding a lot of frequent all-day service. So especially middays and weekends, I want to stress that the service levels there will be greatly increased. So that'll be really helpful for off-peak travelers who need to use the buses on weekends or middays. So hopefully that will be a big improvement. And I think I covered most of these. So I will go ahead and skip ahead. Just a real quick note on fares. We are not proposing any increases. The fares are staying the same in FY22. $2 base fare, $45 dash pass for monthly unlimited rides. These changes you see here are all positive. They're meant to make our fare structure and fare policy simpler and more convenient. We're proposing to change the dash pass. It's currently tied to the calendar. So it's only good for the first of the month or the end of the month. And it's confusing depending on when you purchase it. It kind of either is valid for the current month or the next month. So we're proposing to change that through Smart Trip to be a 31-day rolling pass. So as soon as you buy it, it's good for the next 31 days. And I think that'll be a lot easier to use and understand. And then these other changes are either fare reductions for senior disabled or an potential expansion of some of our revenue share agreements. We currently have a 7-day regional pass that's good for both Dash and WMATA and all the other regional providers. We're looking to expand and offer other products similar to that for people that ride Dash along with other bus providers. And I'm going to wrap things up here. The last couple slides. This is just a summary of the virtual community meetings that we're doing. Obviously, this is the first one. We're focusing West Alexandria. We've got 3 more to go. So if you're interested in these other areas, please feel free to attend these dates. And then we've got a public hearing on the 14th of April at our regularly scheduled April board meeting. And these will all be available for later viewing on Facebook as well. And then we've got just our other ways to provide feedback. Have these listed here. The website obviously is a great place to start, but we have these other ways to provide feedback as well, including the email dashbus@alexandriava.gov. And we're looking to get all input by April 16th. So with that, I will turn it back over to Whitney. We can start with any questions and answers or questions and discussion.
Thanks, Martin. Yes, we do have a few questions for you. So I will just kind of go down the list here and read them off. What are the hours for the all-day service on the new Route 35? Every 15 minutes, 24 hours a day? If not, what is it?
So good question. And all day, it does vary a little bit from route to route. So, when we say all day, it's not 24/7, but it typically does run earlier in the mornings and then later in the evenings. I can give you the exact hours. The span for the Line 35 is from 5 a.m. to 1 a.m. on weekdays. And then on Saturdays and Sundays, it's about 6 a.m. till a little after midnight. So that would be for Line 35. And I should note, if you have specific questions like that, there are route pages on the website. So you can kind of click on your route and it shows you the exact frequency, the exact span for any specific route that you're interested in.
Okay, next question. Is there any service between Bradley Shopping Center to either Pentagon or Pentagon City?
Bradley Shopping Center to Pentagon. There is not a direct route from Bradley Center. You have 2 frequent routes that you could use. One would be Line 31, which runs up and down King Street. And maybe I should try and, oh, it's not gonna work. Yeah, you can sorry, I had a little bit of a delay there. But so you'd have to use 2 routes. One being Line 31. So Bradley Shopping Center is right here. You need to use Line 31, which runs every 10 minutes during peak and every 15 the rest of the week. And you could take that to Park Center and you could transfer to Line 35, which runs every 10 minutes all day on weekdays and every 15 minutes on weekends. And so one of the key things with the ATV that we identified is that, a lot of times we focus on one-seat rides and having a direct one-seat ride from your origin to destination. But if you have a frequent network like this, you're able to greatly expand your ability to get around with the use of transfers. Because the transfers, if you have two frequent routes crossing each other, the transfer is never going to be more than 5 to 10 minutes at most. You're never going to find yourself waiting 45 minutes for a bus. So the transfers become much easier, and we've tried to identify areas like Park Center where we would expect a lot of transfers to occur, and we're working on ways to improve the stops there with additional amenities, with shelters, to make it a much more pleasant waiting environment, so that the transfers not only will be easy and quick, but will also be a convenient place, a comfortable place to do it.
Thank you, Martin. Okay, next question. This is actually two parts. So this attendee is trying to figure out which routes are replacing and comparable to the AT2 and AT5 at Hammond Middle School. They're also not seeing a Metro bus route that is comparable to the current 28A and 25B. Is there something comparable?
Right, so two questions. So Hammond, the first question.
Yes.
Hammond is located right in this area here. I don't know if I have the exact location right, but I think it's right in there. Actually, this might be right here. So it is currently served by the AT2 and AT5. Depending on where you're trying to go, you have a couple different options. You mentioned the 28A Metro bus, which goes through there today. It will still go through there, but there is a realignment of the 28A proposed for going to Old Town. Currently, it goes up Howard and then via King Street. WMATA is proposing a change that would send it to Duke Street, which we believe would be a little more faster and have better connections, especially down along Duke Street. So you could still get to Old Town using that. Perhaps more directly on weekdays, you could use the 102, which would run 30 minutes during peak and every 60 during midday. So the 102 is kind of the immediate replacement for AT2 along that section. And then the AT5 connections, the 36AB will connect you over to TC, over to King Street and Bradley. So you can catch that every 15 minutes all week long. 36A or B, whichever bus comes along, you can take either one. And then that also connects to Potomac Yard in the end. And trying to think of, and I guess along North Van Dorn Street, the 7A is sort of taking over for the 25B along that alignment. So let me just, if I can go back really quickly. Right, so you can see that the 25B currently goes from Southern Towers to Van Dorn Street. Currently it goes along Seminary Road and then down via Taney and then down to Van Dorn, to Landmark, and then Van Dorn Metro. So WMATA is proposing that they would no longer run that route along that alignment there, and instead the 7A would simply go down North Van Dorn Street. So you would no longer have that route running directly in front of directly on Seminary Road. So you'd have to either, if you're trying to go to Van Dorn, you have to walk to North Van Dorn Street, or you'd have to take another bus and transfer. But you'd actually, you'd be able to walk to Kenmore. It's a little bit of a walk, but it is right there.
Okay. Next question. Why is Duke Street corridor reserved for increased service until 2023? Between Duke Street Commons, Fox Chase, and the library, there are community shopping, medical, dental, to include dialysis centers and LabCorp sites between 395 and Telegraph Road.
Sure. So Duke Street is one of our, we've got the AT8 that currently runs on Duke Street, and that is a very productive transit corridor. So between the AT8, which runs every 10 minutes during peaks today, and every 30 rest of the time, and then the Metro 29 KNN, and then which runs every 30 minutes all the time right now, and then also this new 28A alignment, which comes down Jordan to Fox Chase, and then into the King Street Metro via Duke Street. So you've got three routes that are running, relatively often. They're not frequent all day status, but together they approach that. So you do have a very good amount of service there, even though it doesn't come up to the threshold that we consider for frequent all day service. So we really recognize the importance of the Duke Street corridor, and we're going to be seeing a lot of improvements in that corridor in the coming years. but for FY22, we have not been able to include any upgrades in that corridor. I think in our plan, if you look in the plan, I think FY23, we have some minor improvements, and then FY24 is when it becomes full-fledged, frequent all-day service. And then you'll probably be hearing some about the Duke Street BRT plans in the coming years that the city is undertaking, and that's going to include potentially some street improvements that would allow service to run even faster and more reliably along that corridor. So the city has definitely identified that Duke Street corridor as an important one for transit. It's very important for connecting, for residents along that corridor and then also regionally. So we do have a lot of plans for improvement on that corridor. But unfortunately, in FY22, we're a little bit constrained in terms of the resources we have available, and we were not able to implement all the improvements until FY24.
Thank you. Next question we have is, what buses are going to go down Kenmore Avenue? This attendee catches the AT5 right across from their apartment building. Also used to take the AT1 to Seminary Plaza.
Right. So you can see that the 7A will be the main route that operates along North Van Dorn, south of Seminary. So that's going to be the main one that comes through Kenmore here. So if you're asking just about Kenmore, that's the main route. That said, like we talked about just a few minutes ago, that there'll be a lot of buses running along Seminary, and we're expecting a lot of service there. So instead of having to stop at Seminary Plaza, there'll be stops right there at the library, at Hammond Middle School, and there'll be a lot of service going through there that will hopefully meet the needs.
Thank you, Martin. So this attendee was unaware that there was a proposed change to the WMATA 7A. If the change doesn't go through, does DASH have a plan to return service to Van Dorn between Taney and Kenmore, since that would eliminate all service? Also, know of any plan for the 7W or 7Z?
Great questions. So we've been working with WMATA on this plan for since the beginning of the ATV. They've been with us through the entire design process. We've been working on their routes and vice versa. So from a staff level, the proposal as it stands, we're very confident in. And they've been doing their outreach process as well. And from what I understand, there hasn't been a whole lot of pushback. So I would not anticipate that we have to make any additional changes to the 7A alignment. If we had to come to that, we would certainly need to communicate and coordinate with them, because we would not, there's no scenario in which we wouldn't have service on North Van Dorn Street. And then, sorry, the second part of that question, Whitney?
Know of any plans for the 7W or 7Z to return? Right,
okay. So WMATA, so this is a good question, and it relates to these routes, but other routes as well. So WMATA has a number of peak-oriented routes, like the 7W, like the 8S, like the 21D. They've got a bunch of peak-only routes that typically operate along the 395 corridor, and have not been operating since the start of the pandemic. So they haven't operated since March of last year. The information that we've gotten from WMATA is that they are not including those in their FY22 proposals, because of resource constraints, but also because of ridership being so low. Peak ride or commute ridership on a lot of their routes is down dramatically. Once that ridership starts to come back a little bit on parallel routes, or they'll be keeping an eye on that. I think there's certainly a chance that they would bring it back in the future, potentially FY23. But those types of routes that you mentioned, WMATA, I don't think is not at this time planning to operate those in the next fiscal year. So that's the information I have on that. You can go to the WMATA website as well for more information on the specifics of their plan. The 7W you mentioned, part of that will be replaced by the new line 35. I should mention, that's running through this Beauregard Street corridor where the 7W tends to run, and then it goes up through Park Center, but then gets on 395 and goes to the Pentagon. So for 7W, there would be that option as an alternative.
Thank you. Next question. This attendee works at Nova and usually catches the AT5 to Bradley Shopping Center and catches either the AT6 or 9 to Nova. Is that still going to be a possibility?
Let's see here. So Nova is going to be served by the line 31. It'll be the western terminus of line 31, and that route will basically be the King Street route. So anywhere on King Street all the way into Old Town, line 31 will be serving that. So if you're going to Bradley Shopping Center, or if you're going further into Old Town, line 31 will be running every 10 minutes during peaks, every 15 minutes off peak, and then 15 minutes on weekends. So really good frequent service along the King Street corridor that will get you to Bradley Shopping Center. And was there another location? I'm sorry, you might have said another location besides Bradley.
No, just so it was catching the AT5 to Bradley Shopping Center and catching either the AT6 or 9 to Nova.
Okay, yeah, so the line 31 is going to be the best bet for that.
Thank you. Next question. Why doesn't the 102 provide service to the hospital on the weekends for service employees and visitors?
So good question. The 102, we've had some ongoing discussions about the 102. There's relatively low ridership along Seminary and Janney's that doesn't really warrant 7-day service. So when you're talking about, east of the hospital all the way to King Street, we don't really have much ridership there on weekends on the AT2. So that's the reason the 102 doesn't operate 7 days a week. The hospital, it does not just rely on the 102 though. The hospital has several other routes that run 7 days a week that are useful for any staff or whoever needs to get to the hospital for patients or appointments or anything like that. You've got the 28A, which runs every 20 minutes, 7 days a week. That goes all the way up to Tyson's Corner through the Route 7 corridor, and then connects down to Duke Street and the King Street Metro. And then you've got this 36A and B, which runs every 15 minutes all day, 7 days a week. So 28A, not quite frequent all day, but close. And then 36AB is frequent all day, every 15 minutes or better. And that goes up to the King Street corridor and then over to, Arlandria and Potomac Yard. So some pretty good service there, even though you don't have the 102. And the 28A does connect to King Street Metro, so you do have that connection on weekends.
Thank you, Martin. One of the attendees didn't see a route that runs from Seminary Road down King Street like the AT2 or partial like the AT5 and wanted to confirm whether or not they were missing anything.
All the way down King Street, into Old Town, basically. Is that what they're asking?
It says from Seminary Road down King Street like the AT2 or partially like the AT5.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So the AT2 is being replaced by a couple of different routes. Like I mentioned, the 102 is one of those routes that runs between the King Street Metro and Mark Center. So that replaces that segment. And then likewise, the 28A for folks that are coming from the hospital, they can get to the King Street Metro using that. However, the routes don't go through the King Street Metro into Old Town. So I think that might be the question at hand. We've, like I said, we're designing the network so that transfers can be made relatively seamlessly. And one of the ways that we're doing that is that we have this new route or new service called the Old Town Circulator, called the OTC here. It follows the same alignment that the AT8 follows in Old Town, all the way down King Street, Fairfax, and then around to Braddock Road Metro. And that line represents a combination of two lines, line 30, which is the AT8 from Van Dorn Landmark on Duke Street, and then line 31, which is the one that comes from NBCC. Those two routes come together at King Street, and then they kind of become the Old Town Circulator. They're offset so that they can have combined headways that are much more frequent. So the bottom line is that when you get to King Street Metro, if your route is one of the routes that does not continue into Old Town, there will be very high frequent service every 5 to 8 minutes going in down King Street, and you got the trolley as well potentially. So a lot of options for getting into Old Town from King Street, even for the routes that do end at the King Street Metro.
Thank you, Martin. So this question is actually a follow-up from the earlier question about the hours of service for Route 35. And it is, at what time in the evening does the 35 route change from every 10 minutes to every 30 minutes? This will affect commuters transferring at Van Dorn Metro to a bus.
So yeah, that's a great question. So when we talk about the you know, the headways, you know, they do taper in the evening, so you don't have like, for example, line 35 will be running until 1 a.m., but we're not running 10-minute service until 1 a.m. So they do kind of taper down a little bit, and you can see in the charts that I mentioned on the website for each route, you know, what the general headways are in the evenings. So for line 35, you know, I think it was the question on weekdays. Weekdays, when does it go from 10 to 30?
It just said in the evenings. It didn't specify weekday or weekend. Okay,
it must have been on weekdays. You know, I think if I recall correctly, and this is still subject to change, but it kind of goes down right around like 8 o'clock or so. It starts to taper down to like 15 minutes, and then kind of slowly gets to 30 minutes by I think it's like by around 9 to 9:30, something like that. So don't quote me on that, because that's still kind of in flux a little bit, but that's what I believe. That's kind of the approximate timeline for when the taper would be.
Thank you. And this question is actually a follow-up to the Duke Street corridor implementation question from earlier. The question is, how much funding in FY22 would be needed to implement the Duke Street corridor service starting in September of this year? Might funding from the American Rescue Plan be available to fund high frequency all-day service?
So that's a really good question. And the rescue plan funding, unfortunately, this would be a service expansion. And based on our understanding of what's eligible for the funding, we don't believe that expansions are covered by the funding. We're still trying to, you know, the guidelines have just been released. So we're still trying to figure out exactly what qualifies and what doesn't. But I don't believe at this point, our understanding is that it would not be eligible for a service expansion, like what we're trying to do with the AT8. There could be other grant funding sources that we're looking into that could help with it. So we're always trying to think of that, especially for a regional route like the AT8 or Line 30, as it's going to be called. But we don't think at this point that the federal stimulus funding will be available for that. And I don't unfortunately have the number right offhand for what it would be for the extra improvements. There's 2 rounds of improvement. One is for FY23, and one is for FY24. You know, we'll try and have that for our board meeting next month.
Thank you. Next question. Would the new 28A still go all the way up to 7 Corners in Falls Church? If so, the new route down Jordan to Duke would be great for my commute.
So the answer is yes. The 28A is pretty much exactly the same west of the hospital, all the way to the Tyson's Corner, goes through Falls Church, goes through 7 Corners, goes through Bailey's Crossroads, Skyline. So it hits all those spots. So so the folks on Duke Street, Fox Chase area, they'll have a great connection, not only the King Street Metro on one end, but then all the way out Route 7 on the other end, every 20 minutes, all day, 7 days a week. So really, really great regional route.
Thank you. And then this question is actually coming to us from our Facebook Live, so I wanted to make sure and ask this one as well. This attendee takes the AT5 at Taney and Van Dorn to Old Town, and then the AT2 or 8 to Braddock Road. What would their options be?
Can you say the first part? So you said, did you say
Sure.
Taney?
Yes, AT5 at Taney and Van Dorn to
Okay.
Old Town, and then the 2 or 8 to Braddock.
So probably the best thing to do would be to actually, so if I get a slide here. Sorry, 1 second. It'll be helpful if I have a map that I can show. So Taney and Van Dorn, you're going to be kind of in this area here. Really, probably the fastest way that I would recommend is to take the 7A, the WMATA's new route that's going to be running in that corridor. Take that down to Duke Street and pick up the AT8 or line 30 there. And that's going to be probably your best bet. That'll be running every 30 minutes. The Duke Street routes will run at least every 10 minutes during peak, and then every 30 off peak. So probably the transfer there will be your best bet. And then you can take that all the way into Old Town.
Thank you, Martin. That looks like all of the questions, but we do have several comments that I do at least want to share with you.
Okay.
So the first one I have is, I'm concerned that these changes are being made after we've been in a pandemic for a year. Many of the disabled senior population has quarantined for the past year and thus have not used the buses. When you talk about very little pushback, are you taking into consideration the fact that many people are not aware of the changes due to the pandemic? Likewise, with this public outreach, are you taking into account that many people are still quarantining and are not aware of this outreach effort?
Yeah, it's a great point. You know, and when I mentioned that not being a whole lot of pushback, that was in reference to WMATA, and that was purely speculative on my part. So let me walk that back a little bit about the 7A. You know, it's possible that they could have gotten some feedback that I'm not aware of on that. But yeah, I agree. We're in a very difficult situation right now. You know, it's very hard to get people's you know, get on people's radars and let them know about what we're proposing. You know, we did do 3 rounds of outreach as part of the Alexandria Transit Vision Plan over the last couple of years to get to this point where this is the network that we want to move forward with. So there is that aspect of it. However, you know, we're trying to you know, let people know as many ways as we can, you know, through the website, through our emails, through our you know, flyers and social media. You know, and we're also reaching out to a lot of stakeholder groups as well. We have a really good relationship with the Commission on Aging and other commissions like that. So we've sent information out to those stakeholder groups so they can share it with their members. And I think most of them have done so. I think I'm also going to be presenting next month at Senior Services event. So I'll be you know, using that as another forum to get the word out to some of the senior residents of Alexandria. So we're taking you know, whatever steps we can to get the word out. You know, and just any chance we get to you know, attend a community meeting or do whatever we can to share the information. We're taking that.
Thank you. I have 2 more comments. The first one is I would have appreciated a little bit more transparent and explicit discussion of areas that have lost service from both Dash and WMATA's route eliminations. To me, the presentation was all about the improved routes and service and danced around the routes that have been eliminated in those areas that have lost service. I'm sure that the system plan is resource constrained and that criteria were applied to make these hard decisions. I would appreciate that being placed out in the open. If no one is riding the route that they were eliminated, then please share that.
That's good feedback. And if I could, I can just, you know, the good thing about this plan is that there really are not very many areas where, you know, they're not going to have bus service, especially not as far as Dash goes. You know, the one that I did highlight is the Reading and Rayburn. We'll have to walk to Beauregard Street. The other one in the West End is a small segment of Seminary between Fillmore and Beauregard, which has very, very low ridership, but they can walk to Beauregard or Southern Towers. Not intending to not be transparent. Hopefully that wasn't how I came across. But as far as Dash goes, there's very few areas, especially in West Alexandria, where we have you know, service being, you know, eliminated.
Thank you for that. And then the last comment that I see is one of the objectives of the new Dash network is to increase transit access to low-income families. An important component of providing that access is to remove cost as a barrier by offering free or reduced fares for low-income families, as is being done in Kansas City, Portland, and other jurisdictions.
Yeah, great comment, and that's very much in line with what we're interested in doing. We have actually just been working on a study that was funded by our regional body, COG, the MW COG. They offered a grant, and we were able to, through that grant, able to do a study on potential options for free or reduced fares for low-income individuals. So we were kind of, we're actively, reviewing options and seeing if there's a way that we can do it logistically and, what the impact would be. So that's something that's an active discussion amongst Dash and the city of Alexandria. So hopefully more to come soon, but that's, I can just say that we're actively talking about it.
Thank you, Martin. That seems to be the questions and comments that we have. Before we close for the evening, I do have a few additional poll questions for our attendees based on the presentation that you heard this evening. So if you would please just bear with us for a few more minutes while we collect some more feedback from you guys, greatly appreciate it. So Caitlin, will you please share the first, oh, there it is. So for yourself and your own personal transportation needs, the new Dash network will be better than or comparable to the current Dash bus network. And please list whether you strongly agree, not sure, neutral, or need more information, disagree, or strongly disagree. And we'll give you all just a few minutes to reread and respond to this poll. All right, Caitlin, let's move on to the next poll question. Thank you. The next question is, for the city of Alexandria as a whole, the new Dash network will provide better or comparable overall bus service than the current Dash network. And this is also a strongly agree to strongly disagree scale. All right, thank you, Caitlin. Let's move to the next poll question. And this one is actually a follow-up to the previous two questions that you just responded to. So if you did not agree or strongly agree to either of the previous two questions, please don't worry about responding to this particular poll question. But if you agreed or strongly agreed to either of the previous questions, please provide primary reasons for your response. There are several options listed here for you to choose from. There is also, the last option is other. And if there is a separate reason for you selecting agreed or strongly agreed, please include that reason in the Q&A. Caitlin, are people still responding? I want to make sure to give them enough time, but if we've received the bulk of the responses, let's move to the next question.
We have less than half of respondents, but replies have some.
That may, sure, yes. So let's go ahead and move to the next question. Okay, so this question is if you selected disagree or strongly disagree to those first two questions regarding the new Dash network providing better than or comparable service to the current network. There are also a list of options here to select from for as to why you made that selection. Again, there is an other option at the bottom, and if your response is other, please provide that explanation in the Q&A as well. Okay, Caitlin, let's move to the next one. And I believe this is actually the final poll question, so thank you all for bearing with us. Final question, if you selected not sure, neutral, or need more information, please read through the list and select your reasons for that particular response as well. And again, if your selection is other for this question, please include why in the Q&A. Okay, that concludes the polling questions. Thank you all again for your time and attendance. Before we wrap, I do want to call your attention one more time to the ways to provide feedback. If you have additional comments that you would like to provide, if you have additional questions that you would like to ask, the community meetings are not your only opportunity to provide feedback. You can provide it through our website, through our social media channels on Facebook and Twitter. You can give us a call, or you can email us, and that's all on this screen here. We are collecting data until Friday, April 16th. That is the deadline for our community input so that we can share that with our board. And I want to thank you all once again. For those of you who have joined us on Facebook Live, if you would like to participate in another community meeting and participate in the polling, please do so and register through our website, dashbus.com. We look forward to seeing you. Martin, do you have any final thoughts for us before we close?
No, nothing right now. Just thank you very much for your taking the time to be with us this evening, and we appreciate your feedback, and we'll be sharing all the feedback that we received with the board, and they'll be proceeding with their, we've got our public hearing on April 14th, and then they'll be taking under consideration the final plan in May or potentially June, but that's the process going forward. So thank you again for your participation.
Thank you, Martin. I also want to once again thank our board members for joining us this evening, and look forward to hearing more from each and every one of you. Thank you for your time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. Take care.